New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, the three largest cities in the US, respectively, with Chicago maybe being the most underappreciated and underrated of the three. So, how does Chicago rank in terms of culture, weather, transportation, tourism, things to do, lifestyle, etc.? Well, after living in New York and LA, I was determined to find out. And the best time to come? Summertime. So I escaped the May gray and June gloom in California for Chicago. If you live there this year, you would know that this early summer and entire year, honestly, has had awful weather. And I can't believe I'm saying that and escaping California for the Midwest for better weather, but that's where we are right now. So they say that Chicago is the best city to be in the summer, and I can't say I disagree, but there's a few reasons for this. People don't really escape on the weekends like they do in New York and LA. In New York, you might go to the Hamptons if you're rich, upstate, or just the general area. In California, you may go to Santa Barbara, San Diego, Palm Springs, places like that. Whereas in Chicago, there's not many options, so people really just kind of stay in the city, which makes for a really great summer vibe. People really appreciate the surroundings and the outdoors here, and I can see it for myself. And I also did not realize how many beaches were here in Chicago. I was naive to this fact. You might be surprised to learn that there are more beaches in Chicago than there are in Los Angeles County. LA has 20 beaches, Chicago has 24 along the lakefront in the city. Now, of course, the beaches in LA are way larger and the coastline is much longer, but what I really loved about the Chicago beaches is the vibe. And for a while, I was living near Montrose Beach. Somehow, at least right now, Chicago has a better beach vibe and culture than Santa Monica does. I can really feel the energy here today, and I think a big part of it is because Chicago gets so cold in the winter that people just really appreciate when it finally gets warm and sunny here. I can just feel the energy.
What is the temperature though? That is the real question.
It's actually quite warm. I don't know how it's possible so early in June, but the lake temperature here is warmer than the Pacific, I swear. I was always a little snooty when it came to the beach at the lake. I was like, that's not a real beach, it's not on the ocean, but this fooled me. Also, what really makes a great beach for me is not just laying on the sand, but beach activities, such as kayaking, which you can rent one at many. Now this is what a Chicago summer is like. And listen, I love the ocean, but generally I'm afraid of the ocean. Sharks, jellyfish, etc., you never know what you're gonna come across. But in Lake Michigan, there aren't really any predators in the lake. Although it is possible that one day we will discover some piranhas lurking in Lake Michigan. Now, obviously, I'm a bit teased with Chicago being here in June, but aside from the summer, how does Chicago compare to its rivals? Well, thankfully, I'm not in Chicago during the winter because I think my view of this city would be drastically different. Chicago's temperatures in the winter often reach negative digits. And because it's so windy, not even multiple layers can really keep you warm. I personally haven't experienced it simply because I've never had to, but I don't think I want to. Summers, on the other hand, are beautiful. In LA, it's pretty warm. What most people get wrong though is that it's not summer every day in LA. LA isn't Miami. The temperatures are pretty mild, and I'd argue the worst months in Southern California are May and June. Why? Well, again, the May gray and June gloom hit Southern California really hard. I never thought I'd be wearing a beanie living in LA. Especially in 2023, there wasn't one full day of sunshine in May. Now, this year was pretty abnormal, but the gloom in the summer is not. And with summer being my favorite season, it starts a little too late and ends too late in LA. It starts around the 4th of July, where temps start to climb to the mid 80s, and it pretty much stays like that until November, skipping the charm of autumn entirely. It's hard to complain about the overall weather in LA, but it does generally lack seasonal changes, and by the time October comes around, I just really want to be wearing sweatpants and sitting on the couch watching Hocus Pocus, and not blasting my AC. New York has all 4 seasons, obviously, and the differences between New York and Chicago are that it's a bit warmer. The summer heat in New York could be unbearable because not only is it hot, but it is hella humid. Even the winters, which I used to complain the hell out of, are pretty mild when compared to Chicago. And in a really sick way, have its own charm. And I'll say this. LA is lucky to not have cold winters because people really wouldn't leave their homes. And I mean that in the sense that many don't. LA may be categorized as an outdoor city, but I've actually found that more people prefer the indoors. Maybe that's because traffic is so bad. Oh, and speaking of traffic, Chicago does public transit way better. When I first moved to LA from New York City, I loved having a car. I loved the convenience and privacy. I didn't give LA public transit too much thought. I just assumed it was the culture of the city. And I was naive to the fact that the infrastructure is actually so bad. Because there's a difference between having a car and being dependent on a car. And LA car dependency is the norm. On the other hand, of course, the public transit in New York is top tier. And I accept no arguments here. I mean, give me a better city in the US that has public transit like New York City. Not only do you have a fully functional bus and transit system, but the walkability and bikeability is chef's kiss. Now, Chicago is somewhere in the middle. Officially called the CTA or the L by locals, the system is fully operational and does a pretty solid job of getting you across the city. If I had to rate these cities on public transit from 1 to 10, New York, 10. LA, a 3. They're trying though, I give them credit. Chicago, a 6 or a 7. And while I only took the train a few times while I was there, my favorite method of navigating the city was biking. Chicago makes it really easy to bike around the city and get where you gotta go. You can either take the city route or the scenic route. So let's go bike at the lakefront. Pretty much the entire lakefront is pedestrian friendly, heavily used by the locals. 18 miles long, there is a dedicated walking trail and bike trail so that you can limit accidents and cruise at a good speed. Especially in the summer, obviously, that lakefront breeze and general positive vibe of being surrounded by everyone's happiness and appreciation for the good weather makes this my favorite bike trail I've ever done. Up there with the Strand in LA. It was also my favorite way to get from the Lakeview neighborhood to Navy Pier, a total tourist hotspot with its own charm. From a tourism perspective, Chicago is okay. It has the Bean as its primary attraction, which, when compared to something like the Empire State Building, meh, obviously. Navy Pier reminds me a bit of the Santa Monica Pier with a Ferris wheel of its own. That is pretty awesome, actually. Even though I hate roller coasters. Okay, a Ferris wheel isn't a roller coaster, but this kind of is, and this I will never go on. The Navy Pier Ferris wheel has awesome views of the Chicago city skyline, whereas Santa Monica has those nice ocean views, which I have to say, maybe I prefer, but also, why am I talking about Ferris wheels? Do you have a fear of heights?
I sure do, especially when we're this high up. It's by far the tallest Ferris wheel I've ever been on.
So anyway, as you can see now, Chicago is surrounded by lots of water, whether that be Lake Michigan or the Chicago River. And also for tourists, getting on the river is simply the best, especially the architecture tour, which takes you through the river to learn about and admire the architecture and high-rises around the city. And something cool I learned on the tour, Chicago is actually underdeveloped, and with a lot of unused land, there is ample opportunity to continue expanding and growing the city in the future. And let's talk public parks. Because one of my absolute favorite things about New York are the public parks. Whether it be Central Park, Washington Square Park, lesser known ones like McCarran Park in Williamsburg, at least for the tourists, there is a park to fit the vibe for the day. Especially those random ones you run into that are kind of off the map. Okay, so there's nothing really I love more than a city park. You put some greenery around the city and I'll be there. I don't really know why. I think it's a matter of the people watching and just kind of relaxing at what feels like a noisy city, if you can hear that. But just the sense of people coming together, in any one of the parks in the city, bringing their dogs, reading a book, playing some tennis, even with the noise. And in New York, I give it a 10 out of 10. In Chicago so far, I'm liking the parks. In LA, oh, that's a different story. At least they have the beaches. Something that also makes a fantastic city is finding hidden gems in it. The things that people don't really explore. You know, I'm not even going to the Bean on this trip. I can't. I've already done it once, like 8 years ago. I don't feel a reason to go back. But I did come here to Oz Park, and there are statues of the Wizard of Oz characters all around the park, and I'm obsessed. Even 100 years after this movie came out, it's incredible. I don't know what else to say. Let's go find the statues.
She even has on the ruby red slippers. How adorable is that?
And I think what I like most about a city park, actually, it's a place where everyone in a city comes together. Going about your day, you're walking all over the streets, you have your eyes ahead of you, and you're not really taking in your surroundings. When you're in a park, it's kind of just a place to relax. The problem I have with Los Angeles is, again, aside from the beaches, you're kind of just in your car and no one walks and no one goes to the parks. Just gonna say it. Okay, so I admittedly kind of only focused on a lot of the outdoor activities in Chicago for this video, as I didn't do much vlogging around the city or indoors at restaurants and bars. So, well, how is the lifestyle? Well, first, I thought the restaurant scene was pretty great in Chicago. Chicago may not be known for food, but I didn't have too many bad meals. Am I a fan of deep dish pizza? Not really. Do I eat hot dogs? No. But the restaurant scene was pretty great in every neighborhood I was in. And also, just being in the city, walking around, you see a lot of people outside. It's not as busy, but more comparable to New York. In LA, you don't see people walking outside too much, unless they're shopping on Melrose or Rodeo Drive. It's really a bummer. The lifestyle of Chicago is very urban. Due to public transit, it's easy to get around. You have the seasons, so if it's winter, you're probably staying inside or going to a bar. You can walk around the city with your headphones in and watch all the NPCs pass by you. More dense than LA, tourist hotspot, high rises, etc. It feels like an urban lifestyle. So ranking the level of urbanism here, whatever that means, I'll put New York as number 1, Chicago is number 2, and LA is number 3. And this isn't taking into account like quality of life or anything, but just what feels most like a city. Overall, the month I spent living in Chicago is a month I'll never forget. It was a city I didn't expect to love as much as I did. I was kind of in the boat of like New York or LA or nowhere, and now I really do feel like Chicago is really underrated and undervalued. For a US city, it fits the bill, and in many ways does some things better than New York and LA. So even though it's ranked 3rd by population, Chicago ain't bad. In fact, as I'm now back in Southern California, and that June gloom is gone, and even though the weather and palm trees is amazing, I can't say I don't miss it, especially those long walks along the lake and those lakefront sunsets. The lake is where you want to be. I am just taking a stroll here for sunset, people sitting all around the lake, just thinking about life and deep thoughts. Chicago, you beat out my expectations.